Everyone, thanks for joining me here today. I really appreciate the introduction from Dr. Cox and really want to thank FAU and the program that we have here for this, for this program that they put together to help you as entrepreneurs get your business off the ground. I think it's amazing that there's programs like this. And the first thing that I want to say, really, I'm actually a little bit blown away. I mean, it's the middle of summer, and we just had 4th of July, and we got all of you people here signed up for the intensive financial course here that we're putting together. I mean, this is going to be a solid hour of solid statistics, financial ratios, strategies with exam at the end, and you guys all voluntarily signed up for that? I'm blown away by that. So go ahead and take out your calculators. I know everyone brought one here. And we're going to go ahead and kick things off. No, I'm just kidding. No math today. Don't worry about that. You're ready to go, right? All right, got you. Okay. Don't worry. No math today. But I do want to continue upon what Dr. Cox was alluding to, and that's debt financing strategies. So first of all, my name is Tariq Azam. Everybody calls me Sonny. I'm with Commercial Finance Partners, and being here in Boca Raton at FAU, we're right down the street from you guys, literally right at the end of Glades Road. If you're going east, you can drive right into the parking lot. There's a big glass building there, the 1200 North Federal Highway building. Our logo's right there on the main sign. And so we're always, our doors are always open for any of you guys to come in and talk about financing for your small business. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we're different than a bank, per se. You might have a bank come here and present about what their strategies are. We have many strategies with many different types of lenders. So, again, as I said, to continue on with what Dr. Cox was talking about, which was using debt. So there's many types of financing that's available for a small business. The word debt has somewhat of a negative connotation to it because you think, hey, you owe someone money. But debt, from a leverage perspective, can actually be a very powerful tool for a small business, especially because it's a non-dilutive source of capital. So non-dilutive means you're not giving up equity in your business. Okay, so that's a very important concept, especially as you're growing. You want to make as much money as you can. You want to keep control of your business. And that's where debt financing strategies really come into play. So a little bit about me. I've been with Commercial Finance Partners since June of 2017. So that's a full 8 years that I've been with the same company. The company itself is going on 10 years in November of this year. So, pretty long track record of working with small businesses all over the U.S. And we provide many different types of financial strategies to small businesses, which I'm going to go over some of the key types of financing that I think will be very helpful for all of you, and how we differentiate from other lending sources out there as well. And then cap it off with a little bit about our process so that you know what it's like to work with us in general. So me on a personal level, besides just being at Commercial Finance Partners for the last 8 years, I've really grown as a person. When I first came to the company, I had one child. He was about 1 year old at the time. I now have 3 kids, so I have 2 boys, 8, middle one is 4, and a baby daughter turning 1 tomorrow. So I have a busy, very busy household, and I've been married for 9 years. So that's me at home. And if you guys have kids at home, sometimes it can be very hectic being in your house. A lot of times my kids are bombarding me with different questions and they only want something. They don't know what I have to do to get it. But, sometimes being at home, you don't always feel welcome at home. So here at FAU, at this business school, I feel very welcomed. I feel very welcomed with all of you here. So as you can imagine, it feels very good to finally be welcomed at home for a change. So a little bit about me there. And yes, exactly. We're here to support each other. So anyways, I'm expecting a text from my wife any second now saying, hey, when am I coming home? But I'll put the phone on mute. Let's not worry about that for right now. All right, so just to kind of kick things off, let's see if we get the presentation back up on the screen there. So, okay, he's going to get it back up. So a little bit about Commercial Finance Partners besides being about 10 years time in business. And here we go. So let me go ahead and click to the next one. Again, we're a debt advisory firm. Okay, so a debt advisory firm is a type of company that you'll come to and you can explain the type of business that you have. You can explain the situation that you're in. You could explain what your goals are. And we then help you find what is the most appropriate solution. Okay, rather than a specific lender that offers one type of financing, we're not promoting one type of product. So we can then tell you what is the most applicable type of financing for the specific situation. So it's really coming up with solutions. And a lot of clients that we work with, we're, by the way, almost 100% referral based. We have clients all over the US referred to us by brokers, lenders, CPAs, CFOs, attorneys, and people dealing with small businesses. And, as opposed to working with, a direct lender that only offers one type of financing, again, we're going to find a solution, but most of the time, it's solutions that the client didn't even know existed. So there's so many types of financing. When I first came to Commercial Finance Partners, I had about 3 years or so of lending experience at one direct lender that only did one type of product. While I was working at that lender, the name of the company was BFS Capital in Coral Springs. I was also studying at Nova Southeastern University. I don't want to hear any boos, by the way, since we're at FAU. But I was studying my MBA with a major in finance at NSU. So I have an MBA with a major in finance. I was working at a lender for 3 years. I come to Commercial Finance Partners. It took a solid 12 months to learn all the different types of financing that was out there. Not just which types of financing, but what questions do I need to ask the client? What documents do we need to request from the client? Then, once we receive that information, what are we looking at? Because every type of financing has a different set of underwriting. So it took a while, even with all this background, to figure it out. So imagine how difficult that can be for an entrepreneur. You're working on your business, right? You're focused on your industry. You're not thinking about what all the lending types are out there, let alone how to learn about each one and how to underwrite each one. That's not your role. That's our role, right? So you shift it back to us and we reverse engineer and figure out what's the best strategy for you. We offer many different types of financing, which I'm going to go over a short list. And over the years, we've received many different awards and accolades from industry events like the Turnaround Marketing Association, Gator 100, the Inc. 5000 top fastest growing businesses in the US, Best Place to Work by the Small Business Journal, and a few other things like this. So the first thing that I want to go over are the most common needs for financing, and this is very important. So one of the top things that we do is business acquisitions. Traditionally, we're on the buy side of an acquisition, as they call it. So people buying businesses will come to us saying, hey, I want to buy this certain company. We figure out how to finance it. How does that work on the sell side? Well, we help make companies stronger so that you can have a large exit. And especially in technology and other fast-growing industries, hey, there could be a private equity firm that comes in to buy your business at a certain point. There could be a Samsung or a Microsoft if you're in technology, for example. So you want to structure your company in a way that you get the most out of it when you exit that business. So we do buy and sell side of business acquisitions. Working capital and cash flow solutions. This is a common issue for small businesses. And even expanding fast-growing companies find cash flow to be a challenge. So we have many different strategies to solve this problem. Debt refinancing and restructuring is third on this list, but really it's high up in the volume of financing that we do. So we see many situations of small businesses needing financing very quickly in many cases, sometimes taking on very expensive debt, multiple types of financing, for example. And what we can do is we consolidate a lot of these into one structure. So debt restructuring, right, to free up cash flow is a big request that we have. Equipment financing and real estate financing, I bulk that into one because they're both asset acquisitions. So especially for a small business expanding, yeah, you might finance your laptops and some small equipment through like a Dell, for example. But as you start to scale up, or maybe you're in need for some other type of manufacturing equipment or whatever else it might be, even a van in some cases, we do that as well. So that bulks into equipment financing. And then lastly, bridge and growth capital is really some fast-moving, temporary type financing that sometimes a client may have a certain opportunity, for example, that comes their way, and they need to finance it very quickly. We have solutions for that as well. So these are just a list of the most common types of financing that we offer. Going on to the next slide here. Wait, what happened here? Was that on the next one? I think that was, yeah. Yep. Okay, cool. No, actually, yeah, let's see. Okay, so now where do we fit in as far as what types of financing that are available out there? The first one is this. Yeah, here we go. The laser pointer's working. Investment in equity. Okay, this is usually the first step for a lot of small businesses, obviously. When it comes to financing and you have a great idea, people want to join in on that, and you want to use other people's money. Everybody knows about that. So how do you do it when you're an early stage company? And a lot of these are viable ways of getting capital. Angel investors, for example, are people who will come in and see a high growth opportunity. There could be pros and cons there, but that's just one source. Okay, someone coming in very early stage. Venture capital, when you get a little bit larger, maybe a very high growth, very, very high tech opportunity. You may see some VC funds approach you. Capital, raising capital in general, is another way of getting access to capital. One thing I didn't put on here was pitch competitions. Anyone here ever been in a pitch competition before? Pretty common, right? So, these are great ways of getting capital, great ways of, promoting your business, networking, and finding access to people who wants to join and partner with you. So these are some ways. I'm going to skip over commercial finance partners for a second, but banks, okay? So banks may have financing, available. Banks are very difficult to work with, obviously, for a small business owner. I mean, they want to take your money, and there's nothing wrong with banks. We all need a bank. Right? They're good at taking your cash and putting it into a bank account. They want your wealth management and all these other things. But when you actually approach them to get financing, it's not that easy. And I always look back to like some of these old time movies and TV shows. You guys probably have seen some of them some point in your life, but someone's got a great idea. And they say, all right, that's it. Monday morning, I'm going to, get the suit on. I'm going to go right down to the bank. I'm going to pitch my business plan. I'm going to get a loan. Doesn't work like that, obviously, right? So you can't really get access to capital at a bank. Banks will promote that. I'm not here to, hopefully there's no bankers in the room, but hopefully, if you've ever been down that path, it's not that easy. Corporate financing, though, at a larger level, okay, so that's not really attainable for a small business. So we can't really look at that. And then local governments and universities are great ways to get access to capital. Okay, so whether it's a venture program like this that just helps you structure your business to help you show you opportunities to get access to capital, or how to present yourself in a way to get capital. These are great resources. They obviously sponsor a lot of pitch competitions, maybe even have capital set aside. Local municipalities, like the small business economic development councils, oftentimes have access to capital that is not even available to a small business bank, for example. Or even institutions like what we work with may not even have access to some of the resources that a local economic development council may have. Sometimes there's so many programs and capital that there's not enough people even lining up to take the money. So a lot of times with a small business, startup, certain situations, I may say, hey, let's try an economic development council. Let's see what kind of programs they have. The Urban League, for example, a lot of times, and other organizations like this may have these micro loans and access to capital for startups. So oftentimes I partner with some of those. But now just going back to commercial finance partners, I put it kind of right there in the middle because we're not going to help you raise capital. We're not an angel investor. We're not really going to partner with a company at all. We're not a bank, okay, because banks are there on that end of the spectrum. We're kind of right in the middle. Most of our clients, even if they're existing businesses, $10, $20 million in revenue per year, even up to $50 million, sometimes even up to $100 million in revenue, can't even go to a bank and get financing, which is pretty amazing. Or they know that if they go to a bank, it's going to be such a difficult process that it doesn't even make sense to even pursue that. Or maybe even their bank is asking them to leave. And that's for a company doing, 20, 30 million revenue, you name it. Existing companies who are, generating millions of dollars in revenue, their banks want them out, and especially now more than ever. That's actually a huge request that we get right now. Their bank wants them out. Okay, so we're trying to, again, reposition them. So we work with alternative bank lenders in most cases. We're not going to bring you to a TD Bank or Wells Fargo or any of those kind of banks or even a credit union. We're not working with any of those. We're working with banks, but usually alternative bank lenders. So their primary goal in most situations is lending, whereas a bank, like the ones we just talked about, their primary function as a bank is deposit accounts, your checking accounts. They want wealth management and all those kind of things. That's their primary function as a bank, as an institution. The alternative bank lenders, their primary function is lending. So they're more aggressive, meaning they're going to approve a lot more loans and they're going to be a lot faster because they're not getting paid for, investing your money. They're getting paid for closing loans. Okay, so that's who we're working with. And the interesting thing about that is that, most of the time a client will start off going to their bank. Let's just say they don't, have a lot of experience in lending. Start off with their bank. Their bank says no. What's the next place that they go? Google. Okay, so they're going to go right to their computer, their phone, probably right at the bank and find out where's the next place that I can go. Small business lending, they're going to put in term loan, whatever they're looking for, they're going to punch that in. Most of the time, they're going to start getting bombarded by advertisements. If you Google whatever kind of SBA loan or something right now, the first, how many are going to be sponsored ads? And then the rest of them after that are going to be marketing companies posing as lenders. They're going to capture your information. They're going to sell it off as leads. And next thing you know, you get caught up with some kind of broker that, is steering you in a direction that they want to take you in, which is usually something that's going to have the highest commission, obviously, resulting in, bad financing for you as the small business owner. So, we're not working again with those larger institutions. We're going to find out which are the banks that are most willing to lend to you. So again, just kind of going back to that Google example, if you're being led in the wrong direction, you don't know where to go, well, that's where we come in because we know what types of financing is out there. We know what's the most applicable in the situation. We already have built up relationships with these lenders. And so we're going to be able to steer you right towards where you're most likely to get the financing instead of having to go to the Google and then get misled in different directions. And again, you may not even know what's even available to you. So that's where we come in. And that's why we're right there in the middle of, again, hey, maybe you have some equity sponsors. Maybe you have some investment. Maybe it's, you're bootstrapping it, whatever it is. Okay, we're going to help you then get to the lenders who are likely to fund you, not the banks, right? Obviously. So I think that's important for you to just understand where we are as commercial finance partners and why, start to understand why you might want to work with someone like us if you're trying to seek capital for your business. So what I wanted to go to now is a little bit more on some of the key types of financing that I think are most applicable from my experience for early stage startups. And the first one is going to be, and this is interesting why it's the first one that I choose, but it's a personal loans and lines of credit. Okay, so I'm going to go through a slide that shows this a little bit more in depth. But for early stage startups, I find this very useful, and I'll go over why. Next thing is equipment financing and leasing. I have a separate slide for these that I want to clarify what those differences are. But equipment, the need for equipment, I find for small businesses in certain situations is very applicable. Small business administration, SBA loans, we've all heard of those. So I'll go over a few different types of that. There's actually many different types of SBA loans. Accounts receivables financing, which includes many different things, invoices, purchase orders, recurring revenue, okay, like an annual recurring revenue, monthly recurring revenue, for example. We can lend against these things. And what debt lenders are looking for. All right, so this is also probably the most important thing. What do these lenders actually want to see? The first thing is usually going to be credit. Okay, not in all situations, but most time personal credit does play a role because there's not a lot of track record of a business usually to go off of. Okay, so the one thing they look at is, all right, can you manage your money? Do you have credit issues? So that's something that's very important to keep in mind. Debt service, which I'll explain what that is. So debt service is just the ability to pay back the loan. Okay, so most of the time for small businesses, again, not a lot of track record, but if you know this ahead of time of what this is, then you can structure your business in a way that you can set yourself up for financing in the future. So an SBA loan, just kind of skip ahead a little bit. You may need 2 years' time in business in a lot of situations, not all of them, but especially for larger loans. Well, you want to have the financial statements already set up, and you want to make sure that you keep a track of your personal, just like your personal expenses, your debt to income. It's the same thing with debt service. So this is the income versus expenses, right? We want to see profitability and how you can pay back the loan. So this is a key ratio, the debt service coverage ratio is what they call it. Collateral is another thing they look at. Okay, so whether there's equipment, real estate, it could be money in a CD. Different types of financing has different collateral. Inventory financing, the inventory is the collateral. Right? Accounts receivables, we're using your AR, your accounts receivables as collateral for loans. And management. Okay, so this is more of the qualitative versus the quantitative type of approach here. So they do want to see who is managing the business. This is you and people around you that you're bringing on to work with you on this business. So this could be a differentiator from qualifying or not qualifying for financing. So you want to make sure that you can highlight, what your industry knowledge is, who's managing the business, maybe you bring on someone seasoned who understands a certain industry or business operations, so lenders do take that into consideration. And then on the other hand, and I'm just bringing up a slide like this because this is what you guys might be experiencing if you're seeking angel investors or, even family to partner and invest in your business. So what do investors look for? And this is different than what debt financing lenders look for because high potential for growth. Okay, that's probably the first thing that an investor is going to look at. Is what they're investing in with you have a high potential for growth. They want to invest now so that they can have a large exit, right? A huge multiple on their investment. Banks and debt financing lenders, kind of looked at, but do they really care about how much potential? What's your TAM? What's your SOM? They don't care about all that stuff, to be honest with you, right? They will see it in your business plan, but they're not looking for that. They're looking for how are you going to pay me back? Whereas an investor is going to say, okay, wow, we have something here. Huge, actionable market size, things like this, where you fit in. The potential for growth is what an investor might be looking at. Again, that's opposed to what a debt financing lender is going to look at. Clear objectives and key results, or KPIs, right? So these are, again, what investors are really honed in on, where debt financing lenders are not as focused on that. So I do want to point that out. It's good for you in your business to have these things and meet them. And then once you show a track record, okay, that's where debt lenders are looking at. But again, a lot of times over the years, people have approached me with business plans, and it's like, I'm not going to be able to do anything with this because I see your vision, but now we just have to show how can you pay back this loan. That's the only thing that the lenders I'm working with are going to listen to. Well-defined KPI, pretty much just included that already. And then the management team. Now notice I include the management team again because the management team is important no matter what type of financing. Who's managing the money? Who's managing the business? Are we going to grow? Are we going to make money here? Are we going to be able to pay back this financing? Are you going to be able to repay the investors? So who you are is extremely important. And the one thing that I didn't include, but I do want to add to this, is a strong business plan. Now, the strong business plan definitely is looked at by investors, right? But it also is looked at by debt financing lenders as well. Okay? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is not also just to talk about what these lenders and, financing companies and investors are looking at. And I'm kind of getting off track by saying this, but a business plan is actually more important than you think. Anyone here have a college degree? Okay. When you set out to get your college degree, did you start taking classes first? Or did you go to an admission advisor or counselor and pick out which degree that you want to get? You picked out which degree you want to get, right? You may have changed directions, but when you changed directions, then you started taking the classes for that direction, right? Because you had an end goal. Anyone ever use GPS? Obviously, everybody uses GPS. Do you start driving, or do you put the address in the GPS first? Put the address in the GPS first. Then you start following the direction. So, print a MapQuest, yeah. Exactly, yeah. You still have to find where is that end goal. So the business plan, and the reason why I'm diverting to this is because having a clear goal, whether it's in your business or life, you can't hit a target that you don't even see. Okay, so the business plan is looked at as like an exercise. Okay, we just got to put together a business plan, you might think. No, you clearly make your plan how much money you want to make. When do you want to make this much money? Whatever that goal is, how many people you want to service, and you start internalizing that business plan or life plan every single day. And if you do that and you then work backwards in your business plan, you then will achieve your goal. So I have a business plan, even in my role, for what I do. And I read the business plan every single day. And I make that business plan so important to me that I'm fully bought in, and I believe 100% that I'm going to reach my goal. But if I don't have a plan, then I'll just be wandering around and then never do anything probably. So just getting off topic a little bit, but a business plan and really defining where your goal is, what you're trying to aim for, is probably the most important thing, whether you're getting financing or not. But I did want to include that, which is not on the list. So just moving on. Going back to the types of financing. As I mentioned, personal loans and lines of credit. Now, this is a little bit unconventional. Nobody comes to me asking for this. Nobody's ever come to me and say, hey, is there a personal loan? I've never had that question in the last 8 years of this company and before that. A lot of times I'll get a request for things like SBA loans. Okay, and someone comes to me early stage, brand new business saying, hey, I need $500,000. This is the classic, I need $500,000 to $1 million. well, which one is it? 500,000? Do you need a million? Where did you come up with this number? And they start going, huge plan. No. We have to scale that back down to what you can do now. We have to get, a little bit of baby steps. You have to crawl before you can walk, to kind of get to that. We need to go from point A to point B. And one unconventional way of doing this is a program that we have, which is a personal business hybrid loan. And I say that because the approval is based on personal credit. Usually 700 and up is pretty much where you need to be at. 680, is okay. 700 and up credit. And personal income. So like if you have a job, for example, you could prove that you had some income, and now you're trying to start your business off, but you're going to get that off the ground before you go onto that full time. Maybe you're in that situation, or maybe you're married and the spouse has a job, so you have some household income, right? You could potentially get a personal business hybrid line of credit that you can draw from. They usually have 0% introductory rates. The companies usually make money off like a certain percentage. It might be 5 to 10% of the amount they get you approved for. Kind of like store credit, if anyone's ever had some store credit or Dell or something like this, and if you pay off in 6 months, 12 months, you pay no interest. It's kind of like that, all right? But these are ways that you can get access to capital in like 7 to 10 days with just minimal underwriting. Again, just proof of income, proof of credit. We have programs that are easily attainable like this that we use for small businesses all the time. Usually as a stepping stone, sometimes use it as like a down payment for something, potentially. But this is one way that most people don't even know is even out there for small business. Sometimes you have to take on things like this. If you have a really good vision, you know that you have an opportunity, you may have to do something like this. And the types of rates that they charge is pretty similar to what you might get with a credit card. So if whatever you normally get with credit cards, that's usually what you're going to get with this. But again, could either be a line of credit with 0% introductory rates, or it could even be like a term loan with a set monthly payment and an APR. But a lot of people don't even know this exists. And they usually get financing from about $20,000 up to about $150,000, usually where it caps out. So for a small early stage company, this could be a really good fit. The next thing is equipment financing, and there's 2 ways to do equipment financing. There's probably more than just 2 ways, but here's the 2 main ways. And again, for computers, your smaller electronics, you might go with like a Dell or get like a Best Buy, credit card or something like that. But when you start getting like, if you need servers, if you need a van, larger equipment, for example, I'd say anything above 20,000 and up, let's just say, right? Equipment financing and leasing is 2 different ways that you can get equipment, all right, with monthly payments. And a lot of people don't know the difference between financing and leasing. So first of all, financing is like buying a home. You have an APR, principal and interest payments, okay? Interest on financing is something that could potentially be tax deductible. Talk to a CPA. I'm not a tax advisor, right? But you could usually write off the interest on financing programs. They have an APR, so usually these are low APRs, pretty much, from anywhere from single digits to maybe mid-20s if your credit's not as strong. 60 to 80% financing. Okay, so if you're buying a car, like a van, let's say for your business, you bring a small down payment and we can finance the rest. And usually up to 84 months is pretty typical. So usually 7 years financing, okay? The other form of financing for equipment is leasing. Now, when everyone hears leasing for the first time, that's like leasing a car. Okay, so what happens at the end of leasing a car? You give the car back, right? With equipment leasing on your business, you don't give back the equipment at the end. You keep the equipment. The last payment is like $1, $100. If it's a $1, they call it a buck out. You just pay the last payment, and then you keep the equipment at the end. The interesting thing about leasing for a business, you may have a higher rate than financing, okay? So the rate could be in, mid-teens, 20s, let's just say. but 100% of the payment you could write off on your tax return. Not just writing off the interest, the whole payment. Okay? So that's a huge trade-off in itself. Second thing, we can usually get 100% financing with our leasing programs. So in many situations, no down payment. Okay, so if you're already strapped for cash, you can do leasing. Okay, you make a little bit higher payment, but you write off the whole thing. And they also have usually up to 7-year terms. Okay, so this is one way that you can get access to equipment without having to put a lot of money down, okay, and you get to keep the equipment at the end. So that's important to know, that leasing is a whole separate way of getting equipment for small businesses. So financing and leasing, so we look at what's your situation, we figure out what's the best program that you qualify for, and a lot of times lenders are more likely to approve the leasing program than financing programs, okay? Because leasing is a little more risky on the rates. That's why the rates are a little higher. The higher the rate, the more likely to get approved, right? Because they're more aggressive, these lenders, okay? So just pointing that out. Next thing is SBA loans, and this is the one that everyone's interested in. Everybody thinks Small Business Administration, they're going to give me a loan. I want to go to the SBA and get financing. The first thing I want to say about the SBA is that they're not the lender. Okay, the SBA itself is a government entity, and they will sometimes have direct lending programs, all right? So like after COVID, there was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL. It's kind of like a bailout loan, right? A lot of small businesses, even individuals that just had like a quasi-business, qualified for an EIDL loan. And those were 30-year terms. They were like 3% interest rates. We didn't do any of those, by the way, but there was directly with the actual SBA. But for the most part, the SBA is not the lender. They guarantee loans for lenders, kind of like an insurance policy. Okay, so this is important to know because there's so many different types of SBA loans. There's different lenders, banks, and they offer these SBA loans, but they're really just getting a guarantee from the actual SBA. Okay, so what are they used for? This is the first thing I wanted to cover. By the way, commercial finance partners buy product over the years, and again, I've been with the company for 8 years now. By volume, about 50% of our business is SBA lending. We close consistently 80 to 100 million per year in SBA 7A loans. That's the most common type of SBA that's out there with alternative bank lenders. So this is a program that, I know inside and out, but there's different versions of this program. Okay, so the first thing, though, I wanted to cover still is what are they used for? That's more important than what type of program is out there, right? So a lot of times people come to me with all sorts of requests, but it all comes down to what are you trying to do? Okay, that's what you have to think of. What are you doing? What is this money for? A lot of times, by, again, volume, buying a business is probably the most common thing that we see now, especially now with the great, transfer of wealth going on from one generation to another. We do a lot of business acquisition loans. So buying a business, buying out a partner or investor. Right? That's really applicable here to a small business, a startup, to know that you take on an investor, you take on a partner, you want to get them out at some point. You want to regain your equity in the business. Maybe the investor wants out. Maybe someone invested in your company like a family member and they became a partner. They're not really doing anything, but you really do want to repay them, because you want to reward them for believing in your business. You can use an SBA loan to buy out that person, right? So just keep that in mind as you grow your business. Debt refinancing, we do a ton of, so you accumulate. You might have 3 or 4 equipment loans. You might have the personal business hybrid loan. You might have, a working capital loan. You want to consolidate that into one payment? SBA loan is great for that. Buying equipment or real estate. We could look at the equipment financing and leasing program, or maybe we could look at it through an SBA program. Okay, so that's another alternative. And you can use this to buy commercial real estate for your business, not investment purposes, for the company that you operate to operate out of that location. For example, there's a local restaurant here in Boca. Now, what they want to do is they want to buy a warehouse for manufacturing the product that they sell. It's like a bread and meat kind of manufacturing facility. They want to sell that. They want to buy a plant, warehouse to be their plant, and that's what they're going to use an SBA loan for. Business expansion is the last one on that list. So growing the company. When you fill out the application for an SBA loan, one of the first 5 questions is, how many jobs will be created as a result of this loan? You put in the number. If none, that's fine. Right underneath that, we'll say, how many jobs will be lost if you don't get this loan? So if someone has 5 employees, I might say, maybe just put 5. That 5 people will lose their job if you don't get this loan. Might give the credit person someone to think about. Hey, if I don't approve this loan, all 5 of these people are going to lose their job. But it is an actual question that's on the application. So job creation is a huge part of an SBA. That's their mission, to help grow the economy. How do you grow the economy for a small business? By giving people jobs and paying them a salary. And if you pay someone a salary, you're paying taxes. And if that person gets a job, they're paying taxes, and then they go buy things. So they want to see the small business stimulate the economy. So just think of that, again, as the use of funds. You want to hire people, okay? That is what SBA lenders are looking for. What types of terms do the types of SBA loans that we offer? Typically 10-year terms or 25-year terms if you're buying commercial real estate for the business. Okay, so that's important to know because, again, you can get long terms on buying real estate with low down payment. And then the rest of the terms are still 10-year terms, usually no prepayment penalties. So it gives you a long term to pay it off. You pay it off early, you save money on interest. The rates that we offer with the banks that we work with go from Prime Plus 1 to Prime Plus 3. Prime rate is the Wall Street Journal Federal Reserve prime rate. You probably see a lot of things like this in the news nowadays. Is the rate going to go down? It's currently 7.5%. And if it's Prime Plus 3, that means your rate is 10.5. Okay, so if the prime rate goes down, that portion of your rate that you're paying goes down as well. But whatever they add on is going to be fixed. Now, one thing to note with this is that like your TD banks, your Wells Fargos, your credit unions, they're going to have lower rates than the alternative bank lenders. So Prime Plus 0, Prime Plus 1, that's what those lenders are going to do. But remember, how likely are they to close? A lot less likely than these aggressive alternative bank lenders. But they're capped on the rates. They can't just make up what they want. The maximum they can charge is Prime Plus 3. Okay, so keep that in mind, that if you go with an alternative bank lender like the ones we work with, you're not getting hit over the head with crazy interest rates that they just make up. They're capped on what they can do. And again, the SBA is not the lender, right? They just guarantee loans for lenders. So lenders themselves, they have to follow the guidelines of the SBA program. So there's rules, they call it a standard operating procedure, an SOP, that they have to strictly follow. So everybody, no matter where you go, is going to structure an SBA loan a little bit differently. They may have different types of loans, like different types of companies that they're looking for, different types of use of proceeds. Some of these lenders we work with, they'll call us up and they say they only want business acquisitions. Some of them will do franchises. We have some of them that will do startups. Some will do projection-based. They're all different in their credit box as far as what they're looking for. Again, giving another layer of complexity to the small business owner, because how do you know which lender is doing what types of loans? It's no way to do it because they don't just advertise, hey, we're the bank for startups. They're going to say, hey, we're SBA, whatever it is, right, that they offer. But we know which lenders are doing what types of loans. So that's where we can come in and say, hey, this is the situation. This is the lender. Maybe there's 2 or 3 options of who we can go to. and not waste your time going to a lender who has no interest in doing the loan that you want to do, right? Because it's wasting their time and yours and ours as well. Besides the rates, all the lenders have typically a 0.5 to 1% origination fee. Okay, so these are kind of standard. You're never going to see someone that has 5%, nothing like that. The SBA itself has a fee. It is currently basically 3% on most loans. Prior to June 1st, there was sometimes 0% SBA guarantee fee. It was a sliding scale, it could be 1%. There were some discounts. If you're a veteran, for example, we can sometimes waive off this fee. Okay, so they may not just go out and say that to you. They'll give it to you. Don't get me wrong. They're not going to say, oh, you're, not going to not tell you. But just point that out, right? So that we may be able to waive off the fee, but the fee goes right to the SBA if they do charge you a fee. It's not like anybody's just charging you for the sake of charging. It's just the SBA has a document that they publish, and that's what the fee is, and that's what it is. No one's going to offer anything different. So meaning that you go with us, with these alternative banks, they're not going to rip you off. It is what it is. Like, that's just what the rate is, right? So don't feel like, hey, if I go to the bank, I might get a lower rate. It's going to be the same kind of fees no matter where you go. And then us as brokers in this situation, anything under $1 million, we ask for 2%. It's a packaging fee. We don't charge anything up front. So we're not charging a consulting fee. We don't have a retainer. It's all for closing. So if we can't do it, we're going to tell you that we can't do it, pretty quickly. Right? We're not going to waste your time or ours, like I said. And these are all basically this is what the main SBA program, the SBA 7A loan is. So before I go on to the next slide, I mentioned in the very beginning, there's many different types of SBA loans. Right? So these economic development councils, they might have micro loans. They change the names every now and then. They might have like a Bolt loan, a Quick Start loan, like whatever the name is at the time. These economic development councils might have access to these programs where they don't allow like a lender, a private lender, to have access to those kind of programs. Okay, so what we're looking for is typically, $100,000 to $5 million on an SBA loan. Okay, so again, it depends on what you're using the funds for. If we have a program that may do a smaller loan, we'll tell you, hey, this is available. Or we'll say, hey, personal business hybrid loan. Or I might say, hey, let's try the Economic Development Council or Urban League or something like this. And maybe they can get some other kind of loan. The other loans, there's SBA 504 loans. These are usually larger loans for buying real estate, usually in historic areas that you're going to redevelop. So these larger manufacturing kind of facilities. I'm not going to go through all the details of what that loan is, but it's very different than the 7A program. The 7A is like the most versatile, most common SBA loan that's out there. All right. So again, we figure out what's the most applicable for your situation and then present these as hey, here is our roadmap now. Here's our strategy, short-term, long-term. Right? And that's pretty much what we do. So that leads me right into, and this is kind of gearing up towards the end, is the process that we have at Commercial Finance Partners. So we have a standard process with every client. We almost always start with a 15 to 30-minute conversation where we're asking basic questions from an underwriting perspective. A little bit about you, what your business does, how you do it, how you operate, how you charge for your services, how you collect. Like, these are the things we want to know. Right? And we start building up a write-up, as we call it. Because then, at that point, what I could do based on this information and based on what your goals are, what you're trying to do, I could then figure out what is a strategy. Okay? Do we go with this? Do we go with that? Right? We start getting the idea. Once we know and say, all right, we know what the strategy is, you guys are okay with that, we'll say, this is the documents that you need for this type of financing. So I'm not sending you a long laundry list of all kinds of crazy information that I don't need. We're getting the information specific to that strategy. Okay, and that's very important because it's not wasting your time. And you know what to expect. So you come out of the call knowing there's a strategy, and you know what documents, you know what you're going to need to get together, right? The next thing from there is once we receive the information. So when we get the information from you, everything stays in-house, right? So we're not getting the info, uploading it on the internet, shooting it out to different lenders. We're keeping it in-house, and we do somewhat of what we call an overnight analysis, right? So we get the information, data processing is what we call it, and that runs all the calculations in our system, right? We have all the calculators, all the tools built out in our CRM, so we can see what's applicable for us. But then at that point, what happens is we go into our internal underwriting process. So I've already taken the notes from the call, got my write-up together, right? We know what the storyline is here. We know who's doing what, how you operate. We know what your goal is. We have the documents. We've calculated, all the financials or whatever else we might need. Then we have an internal underwriter that's going to review the notes. They're going to review the calculations. They're going to look at it from the type of lens that lender might look at something. Again, remember in the very beginning, it took me a year to figure out, all right, what do we need for this lending? What do we need for that? Because it's all different. So we're not going to look at an SBA file in the same way we would look at an inventory finance file, because they're two different types of underwriting. So we're going to kind of play as if we are the underwriter at a specific lender. But if we can do this, and by the way, in this process, if we can't do it, we're going to tell you that, hey, either on the first call, I might tell you there's nothing we can do. End it right there, 15 to 30 minutes. If we say there's a strategy, we get the information, we process it, and we say the calculations don't add up, we'll tell you right there, right, that it's not going to work. But let's say that we have some additional feedback, we need some additional documents, we'll tell you what that is, right? We'll go over this feedback with you. But if we do all of this, then we can do strategic lending placement. All right, what I mean by that is that, remember, thinking back to the SBA loans, there's different lenders that are doing different types of deals. Same thing with accounts receivables financing. Like, we're a direct lender for accounts receivables financing, but if it's not a fit for what we're doing, we might have someone who's more specific for that, okay? But we don't have to shop you around and go to 5 different lenders or 10 different lenders and start shooting your information all over the place. We can go specifically to a certain lender because we know what their credit box is, we know what they're looking for, you fit what they're looking for. It should have a high chance of success. And that's really what we do. So again, no shopping around. And then we work with you as the client the entire step of the way. So again, we don't charge any upfront fees like I mentioned. So if we can't do it at any time of this process, we'll at least give you some good feedback of why we can't do it. And that in itself is valuable if we can't do it, because then you know why. And you know that maybe you have to change some things in your business. Maybe you have to wait. Maybe, whatever the feedback is. But you're not wasting your time. This is all within, 2 days that we take to do our process. A bank, again, there's no bankers here, right? A bank might take 2, 3, 4 months before they actually give you feedback. And a lot of times, we get SBA loans, and the client comes to us and said, I tried with the bank for 3 months, and then they told me no, and the reason why they said no was the reason that was given to them on the very first day. So, after months of waiting, they'll come back with some ridiculous reason. So we don't do that because we're not getting paid if we can't, close a loan for you, right? We're not looking for your bank account. We're not looking for your investment, wealth management and all that kind of stuff. So that in itself is what Commercial Finance Partners does, how we do it. Yeah, and I want to thank you again, Dr. Cox, for the invitation here to speak in front of you. I'm always happy to answer your questions after this. You want to reach out to me at any time, or Luke, or anyone else at the office. Again, we're right down the street. You can always stop by, have a conversation. Feel free to come by and, don't come by every day, but feel free to set up an appointment. Happy to have you down there. Happy to support you guys in any way, shape, or form. Again, we are a direct lender for accounts receivables financing. Debt advisory is the core of our business. We didn't actually get a chance to talk about life insurance, but we do own a life insurance agency, which I'm a managing director of, which is Commercial Finance Partners Insurance Services, LLC. So we can do business insurance and life insurance. So these are specifically for financial strategies for small businesses, which we can always talk about at another time. So again, once again, thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak in front of you, and hope you enjoyed and found something useful here. So thank you again. Thank you. Hey, thank you so much.